Assalamu alaikum. In my opinion, to consider yourself to be an indigenous African American, many characteristics should be considered. If your family has African roots that has been in America since slavery in the United States, if you are identifiably black by American standards, i.e., you look black or have brown to dark brown skin, you have at least one full black parent, or more specifically, your black parent has more African DNA than of any other race. You are culturally raised in a black family, Nowadays, many people want to be black because it's trending. As the saying goes, everyone wants to be black until it's time to be black. Or, in other words, everyone wants to identify as black until you are discriminated for being black. Until you are discriminated against for being black. We need to acknowledge that the view of race in the United States is seen much differently than in the rest of the world. The legacy of racism still lives. The legacy of racism still leaves its ugly mark on everything. The one-drop rule was a law that was introduced in Virginia to preserve the racial integrity of the Anglo-Saxon race. This law dates back to 1662. They wanted to keep white blood pure. So, if a white person had one black ancestor, way back when, they would be considered a Negro. Even on birth certificates, you had to indicate this as well. If a person was found to be lying, they could face jail time. The one-drop rule can also be called hyperdescent, which is defined as classifying or identifying a biracial or multiracial individual as a member of a lower or lowest society ranking group from which that person has ancestry. The legal notion of hyperdescent has been upheld as recent as 1985, when a Louisiana court ruled that a woman with a black great-great-great-grandmother could not identify herself as white on her passport. The woman identified herself as white. She was raised as white with white parents, and she has white children. Most of her identification identified her as white, except for her birth certificate. The one-drop rule was, except for birth certificate, that one-drop rule was outlawed in 1967, which wasn't that long ago. So it was possible that during the time her mother gave birth to her, the law was not outlawed then, or could have been possibly newly outlawed and she wasn't aware of it. Outside of the courtroom, this rule lives on in the black community. For instance, the author of Right Like Her found out her mother had mixed race heritage. The Seattle Times and some other notable newspapers wrote about this story. The Seattle Times headline read, "I thought I was white until I learned my mother's secret." I didn't put the entire title on there, but this was dated October 14th, 2021. This woman only has 7% of African DNA, and now she views herself as not white but mixed race. Because of this book, people are asking her how she feels to be mixed, even though she was an obvious white woman, was raised as a white woman, and still looks like a white woman, you know. They had her on TV shows and all that, which I felt was pretty ridiculous. Mixed blood in the white community was seen as impure. It was something shameful. It wasn't until in recent years when there has been a problem with people who are trying to identify as a minority to benefit from it. There are some business loans available for only minority business owners. So there have been some white people who have been raised white, look white, and identify as white for all their lives, who suddenly wanted to identify as black so they could financially benefit from it. A few years ago, a YouTube channel named Everybody Hates Angel mentioned one of these stories in a video where a white man who found out he had a tiny percentage of African DNA used that as a way to get a business loan. He only identified as a minority on paper so that he could try to get a loan. Thankfully, his application was denied. But there's more to that story. I'm not going to put all the details. I'm not going to tell you all the details now. You can try to look it up, because this happened in Linwood, Washington. I believe it was like 2018. I didn't write it down on my notes, but okay. Although race relations have slightly changed over the years for the black community, but that one-drop rule has been embraced by many in the community, often to our own detriment. Many people look at this rule like a badge of honor. The problem with this is that the black community has been welcoming to anyone who suddenly identifies as black, as long as they say they have one drop. They are welcomed. The reality of this is that many people are trying to temporarily identify to take advantage of an opportunity. For instance, Kamala Harris is using her father's heritage as a political stunt, in my opinion. Due to people's acceptance of that false rule, people are trying to get her to become the first African American and Southeast Asian woman president. Kamala does not have African American roots. Her family is not from America at all. Her parents weren't considered American citizens until long after she was born. So they were still immigrants when she was born. Her mother is full Indian. Her and her father, reread that. Her mother is full Indian, and her father is a Jamaican born with, I did not write this properly, so I have to kind of edit it as I try to read. Her mother is full Indian, and her father is a Jamaican born from mixed race parents. Her father, Donald Harris, can be considered around 1/4 black. which would make Kamala an 8th. She is more Indian than African because she is half Indian. And most likely she's 3/4 Irish. Furthermore, she was mostly raised by her mother, so she was raised with a foundation of Indian culture. She might have lived around African Americans as classmates and friends, which would have introduced her to black culture, but that wasn't her primary foundation. Okay. Kamala is multi-generationally mixed. She should be considered an Indian American with some African Jamaican roots because this is the truth. I find it annoying when people try to push hard Jamaican heritage in our face, because Jamaican does not mean African. In fact, the first people to settle in Jamaica were a South American tribe that lived there for 900 years, way before Christopher Columbus arrived. Jamaica did not start becoming black until enslaved Africans were shipped there. Furthermore, some of Kamala's ancestors came from Ireland. They were slave owners. So, assuming that Jamaicans are all black or African is absolutely incorrect. This racist one-drop rule needs to be buried and stay there. The concept of being an indigenous African American needs to be re-examined. There are many people out there that are in denial of who they are in terms of ancestry. How does one ignore the majority of their own DNA and highlight the smallest portion? Because if that is the case, then I am a white American. Because I am 4% Scottish, 2% Irish, 1% Spanish, and 1% Welsh. That makes me 8% white. If we get to make up drastic rules on race, then why can't I therefore identify as white? You understand what I'm talking about, right? I hope you do. Because if she's 8% black and that makes her black, and I'm 8% white, then that should make me white, right?